Hello and welcome to the Leader Sustainability in Asia Pacific webinar. My name is Esther Chang, Executive Director of the Global Compact Network Singapore. I'm very delighted to see so many people tuning in today. We have more than 700 participants registered for today's event coming from across Asia and Oceania region. It is a very great pleasure to have so many of you here with us today. Well, we're on the path to recovery from the COVID pandemic. It cannot be denied that it has caused a humanitarian economic crisis on a parallel scale. Further, it has threatened to push the 2030 agenda far off track. However, at the same time, the pandemic also presents an opportunity for businesses to transform themselves. It is clear that business as usual is not an option for a sustainable recovery. At COP26, the United Nations Global Compact, in partnership with Accenture, launched the CEO Sustainability Study. It's called Climate Leadership in the 11th Hour. The study was conducted with over 1,000 CEOs across over 100 countries and 21 industries. It offers a very candid view on the urgent opportunities and challenges that businesses are facing in the face of a climate crisis. As planning and progress for post-COVID recovery continues, the prospect of recovering better should be strongly anchored on the UN 10 principles and the integration of sustainability across the business. In today's 1-hour session, you'll hear key findings from a study presented by Mr. Jurgen Coppens, Managing Director of Accenture Strategy in Southeast Asia. Jurgen will present insights from the CEO study and with a special focus on perspectives from Asia region. We will then dive into a regional insight through an interactive panel discussion with 3 distinguished guests who are sustainability pioneers in Asia. We hope you'll take away useful insights to help you set ambitious goals, scale impact, and drive transformative change in your company's sustainability efforts. The recording and presentation deck from today will be shared with you after the event. And throughout the session, should you have any questions, please do use the QA function at the bottom of the screen. We will have an active Q&A right after the panel session. Now, let me just welcome Mr. Jurgen Coppens to share the key findings from the 2021 United Nations Global Compact Accenture CEO Study, Climate Leadership in the 11th Hour. Jurgen, over to you.
Thank you very much, Esther. And good afternoon, everyone. Very excited to be part of this event. So let me share some highlights of the study. If we can move to the next slide. So as Esther was mentioning, as Accenture, we've had the privilege of partnering with UNGC for a number of years to conduct this study. And it is a very comprehensive undertaking, right? In terms of 113 countries, it's cross industries, 21 industries covers elements of surveys and in-depth interviews, and leads to quite interesting insights, both in terms of understanding kind of like year-on-year shifts, right? We've been now running this for over 10 years, as well as the perspective of more growth markets versus established markets, and also industry perspectives. And so I'll be sharing today, right, more of the growth market perspective, right, linked to which is more linked to the geographies we all operate in. So if we can move to the next slide. Let's move to the next slide in terms of a bit of the state of ambition. Next slide, please. Okay, so growth market CEOs actually have a higher ambition than the average, right, in terms of the ambitions on sustainability. So that's what we see a bit on the left on areas of leadership. So 56% of CEOs in Asia, for example, right, have adopted ambitious sustainability targets on the back of the pandemic, versus a global average of 44, right? So likewise, with regards to providing workforce with social security net and those considerations, and a similar dynamic in terms of the views of to which extent companies voice to governments, right, their opinions with regards to climate policy advocacy. So there's a real proactiveness there on one side and a given level of ambition. If we look at a bit of the barriers, right, still 34% of CEOs say that implementing, right, the strategies across functions to achieve that ambition is the top barrier, right? So making this pervasive across the organization and enabling all of this to come together. Then also 43% of CEOs, right, versus an average of 49 have begun divesting from existing fossil fuel investments. So that's slower than the global average. And similar message with regards to the views or risks with regards to inability to access natural resources linked to the impacts of climate change. So there is a high ambition, right, and the need to move more to execution. If we can go to the next slide, there's unanimous perspective, right, that at the CEO level, right, that the sustainability priorities are here to stay, right? So 58% of growth market CEOs say the pressure has increased significantly. 70% expect that to increase even more over the next few years, right? So very clear message here. I think what's interesting then is if we look at the mix, right, of stakeholders and relative importance of stakeholders. So globally, actually, since 2016, right, we've seen investors shoot up, right, in terms of the relative positioning. They were number 8, excuse me, in terms of stakeholder importance, pushing for change, right, and have shot up to number 3 globally, right, in terms of the relative ranking of stakeholders. We don't see that yet for growth markets, right? So instead of shareholders, it's still more communities. So customers and consumers, right, pushing for change, followed by employees, followed by communities. But this strong message that globally, right, investors are really pushing for change and flexing their muscle, which is something that we see almost on a daily basis in the news as well. If we can move to the next action in terms of slide on maturity of sustainability actions. So this is a relative ranking, right, of the types of actions we see across industry. So you see that a lot of the actions are still more on embedding, the codes in business ethics, right, setting up elements of the targets, upskilling, establishing elements of sustainability governance. So a bit of the initial steps, right, I would say, with lower levels of maturities with regards to using technology to collect all the data organization-wide, starting to have the initiatives in terms of developing new products and services, the topics around circularity, cross-sectoral partnerships, etc. Right? So this is a bit in terms of the evolution, right? And the maturity of the types of actions being taken. Let's maybe move to the next section to give a quick perspective on the barriers. So we can move to the next slide. And this again is from a growth markets perspective, right? So affordability and availability of technology, right, still remain a disproportionate barrier in growth markets. Followed by the financial considerations, right? So lowering the cost of sustainability actions to enable the innovations. And then there's also some perspectives here, right, on to which extent the developed markets still set the agenda. And then also some of the social considerations and some considerations about systemic inequalities across value chains, which remains a challenge in our parts of the world. Maybe one thing to highlight as well from a lot of the discussions, especially in growth markets, that topic of the lack of certainty, I would say, with regards to the political or regulatory environment as it relates to sustainability, also often comes up in the discussions, right? So, just having that confidence linked to the frameworks, etc., to be able to make the investments. And then if we look at the maturity of the climate mitigation kind of actions on the next slide. So we can see that a lot of the actions here are right on community engagement, developing the net zero targets, etc. So these first set of actions, but operationalizing things, right, is the next area of opportunity, right? So understanding really the financial risk, measuring and reporting scope 3, and those kind of considerations, linking also the remuneration of the leadership, right, to the actions being taken, and so some of these kind of considerations, right? So back to operationalizing, right, what needs to be done. And let's maybe then go to the elements of giving some perspectives, right, on the types of investments and actions being taken, and also specifically on technology solutions, because I think there's some interesting insights here, right? So if we look at the technology solutions impact on sustainability, right, and what's being prioritized, I think there's some good news here in terms of, you know, elements of really leveraging data across, right, analytics models, so enabling that visibility end to end, right, to enable the organization, right, to holistically take the right decisions, understand risk more holistically, enable innovation, etc., as opposed to more of the, you know, the point solutions, I would say, right, on the right, right. So so that's elements of where the investments are going. One thing I would highlight though at the bottom, right, is that although growth market CEOs, right, saying that these investments in technology are critical, right, and what they need to prioritize, in the facts, we see that, you know, that a fair amount have not started yet with regards to making these investments, right? So there's an understanding of what to do, but still in the facts, right, then the need to prioritize these investments. If we move to the next slide, and this will be my last sharing slides. So we also actually do some analysis that's, I think, quite interesting in terms of, you know, the correlation, if you will, right, between what we call transformational sustainability leaders, which are really the organizations that prioritize sustainability, and what kind of actions we see there versus the rest, right? So what you see here is, you know, the leading companies have increased their budgets, you know, have diversified their material inputs, right, on the back of the recent challenges as well. Are making R&D investments, right, into resilient climate solutions, are digitizing technologies to enable visibility, et cetera, right? So you see a quite consistent perspective here in terms of the behaviors, right, of CEOs that are kind of like leading the way, if you will, versus the rest of the industry. So that's, you know, the highlights of the sharing. I'm conscious, you know, we've gone through this very quickly. I mean, the reports are publicly available, and there's a lot of very detailed information. But hopefully that gives a sense of some of the highlights. And we'll now transition to the panel the discussion. Okay, I'm very honored to have the privilege of maybe introducing our distinguished panelists who will share their insights of their own sustainability journeys. So let me maybe start with Esther on, first of all, who's the Chief Sustainability Officer at City Developments Limited, and who's been a true SDG pioneer, right? Really spearheading the efforts at CDL, but also mobilizing the wider ecosystem. So very privileged to have her on the panel. I'll also, my pleasure to introduce Mr. Raja Amir, who leads HSBC Malaysia and has spearheaded the bank's transformation into a sustainable bank. I will also hear from him some of the priorities on enabling sustainable financing and some of these considerations. And last but not least, Dr. Chaya, who has spearheaded the transformation of PTT Global Chemicals from more traditional oil and gas to renewables and all the sustainability considerations linked to that. So welcome to all our panelists. So maybe as a first question, I'll invite each of the panelists, and maybe we'll start with you, Esther, and follow the order of the introductions, right? But for you to maybe just quickly introduce, right, your company's sustainability agenda, priorities, you know, the ambition, right, that you've set and what you aim to achieve. And then we also saw in the survey, right, that 34% of CEOs are still saying that having the ambition is one thing, but implementing it, right, across business function is actually the real challenge, and this company-wide approach. So keen to hear, right, to which extent that also relates to your experience, right, and how you've approached that.
Thank you, Jurgen, and well, really pleasures to be here. Well, sustainability really exploded into the mainstream over the last 2 years. And I have the honors to have started the journey about 2 decades ago. And I would say that the last couple of years really, is charging at the F1 speed as compared to the beginning of the, my journey, that hardly anyone talk about ESG or green building or sustainability. But how we started is, as in the building and construction sector, we know that we have very high carbon footprint. Even today, we are still accounting for close to 40% of global greenhouse gas emission. And what we feel is we are also in an industry to influence people, because everyone, you live in a home, you work in an office, you use buildings, and so how you use your buildings is also very important. And we feel that we really, in the building sector, we can drive change, not just, locally, but also regionally and globally. And well, when we talk about ambition, and this is really the right word to use, because there is, climate emergency that we are talking about. So we need to be ambitious. We need to really speed up, accelerate action. And in 2021 February, we actually took the bold step, consolidating all the years of green building and sustainability efforts, and pledge for net zero. And if you're using today's technologies and practices, you won't be able to achieve, net zero. And that is also the reason why that it has to be ambitious, so that you can drive action. And that was also the idea of, climate change scenario and Paris Agreement and the science-based target. And we are also one of the first, in Southeast Asia to pledge for to adopt SBTI, science-based target, greenhouse gas reduction target, since 2018. And last year we have actually aligned with the 1.5 degree, and instead of 2 degree. So all these are actually pushing to the agenda, and we were very, very happy. In 2019 we joined the supported the UN Global Compact on the 1.5 degree business ambition. So the climate change is really a biggest threat to humanity. It's a global problem that require global collaborations and partnerships to tackle these threats to humanity. Would be happy to share more later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Esther. And already a strong message of upping the ambition and the fact that it's a continuous journey, right? Maybe can I invite maybe Raja Amir from HSBC to share his views as well?
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Jurgen. Good afternoon, and it's a pleasure to be on this panel with such distinguished individuals talking about such an important topic. Just to very quickly go through, in a high level, some of the initiatives which we at HSBC have embarked on since October 2020. The first really is around aligning our finance emissions with the Paris Agreement goal of net zero by 2050 or sooner. Within the context of this alignment, we have allocated about up to $1 trillion of sustainable finance and investment to support our customers in their transition to net zero and a sustainable future. We've also, in terms of our own supply chain as well, we've also set a target to ensure that our operations are net zero by 2030 or sooner. And we're currently working with our own suppliers to achieve the same goal in our own supply chain. Thirdly, in terms of unlocking climate solutions, and this is, we've noticed this from the feedback from the survey, is that we are, committed to investing and participating in financing for such clean tech innovation and sustainable infrastructure and nature-based solutions. So we have a target of up to 100 million to support clean tech innovation companies, as well as launching a new philanthropic program with an aim to donate up to 100 million between now and 2025 to bring the brightest ideas to a commercial scale, which is clearly one of the most important issues, which is scaling such expensive technology in the early and recent years. In terms of our own risk appetite and sort of risk framework, we've developed what we call the transition risk framework. And this covers areas which are, such as power generation and utilities, oil and gas, mining and automotive, construction, amongst others. And within this framework, this allows the bank to establish a consistent approach in providing control as well as oversight of the credit risk impact of the transition to a low carbon economy, as well as helping us to identify potential business opportunities to support such transition. We are currently reviewing and fine-tuning this framework. This is obviously a journey, as we all will go through, and the focus will be developing a methodology, data analytics, as well as climate-related scores for our customers and our portfolios. And then just very quickly, in terms of bringing this back to our own ambitions within Malaysia, we are currently on a 24-month bank-wide initiative to transform HSBC Amanah to be a leader in sustainability globally as well as in Malaysia, with an aspiration to be the first bank in Malaysia to institutionalize and publicly declare our aims through the lens of value-based intermediation, which is a term which is being coined by the Central Bank of Malaysia. And then just very quickly to address your second question, which was about the issues faced by in terms of implementing strategies across business functions. I mean, that truly is a really big issue, and if you don't really have that top-down sort of approach, in that respect, then it will really be difficult to get the buy-in from cross-business functions, because as you would imagine, different business functions have different requirements and also objectives. So number one is to, really needs to be a top-down approach. In some cases, a regulatory push helps as well, because, when there's regulatory pressure on companies, then, it becomes then a requirement. And in Malaysia itself, the stock exchange, which regulates public listed companies, and also some of the, the regulatory framework has empowered the board to be the main line of defense in terms of rolling out each and every organization's climate and sustainability objectives. So, that is one in terms of getting, a top-down approach and ensuring it's a whole of organization as opposed to just, your department will be focusing on this. And then, just finally, very quickly, in terms of, our own journey, I mean, I'll be pleased to talk through this, but, this has really been driven as a top-down approach, and we in Malaysia are taking this opportunity to align our own ambitions with our own group ambitions. And we will talk more about that in the ensuing questions.
Thank you very much. So here again, I mean, I think quite inspiring messages, right, with regards to level of ambition and specificity of what we aim to achieve and the related targets. Dr. Chaya, can I invite you to share with regards to the journey at PTT Chemical?
Thank you, Jurgen. I think like other company, right, GC also put very importance on sustainability. And I think we started the journey more than a decade ago, right? And now it's part of business, meaning it's been integrated to all the business unit. But based on our aspiration, I think we have set very challenging aspiration in line with the Paris Agreement by committed and pledged to net zero by 2050. And I think along the way, we have set a clear target for short term and medium term, long term, right? For example, in 2030, we have to cut down about 20% of our greenhouse gases. And I think because we are in the manufacturing sector, I think it's quite challenging for us to do so, right? But it's not just a single company can do it. I think it's a collaboration is quite important. And we have worked with our supplier and customer to ensure that we can, in our ecosystem, we can help each other and cut down not just on scope 1 and scope 2, but also in scope 3 as well. And we also working across sector, not just on the chemical sector, but other sector in our value chain to ensure that people are working closely together and have the same aspiration and targets.
Thank you. Yeah, I think great insights here on this being a whole ecosystem effort and the collaboration, right, across the supply chain and even across other industries, which we'll come back to. So Rajamir, thanks for sharing everything that HSBC is doing also with regards to really enabling sustainable financing, right? So where you shared quite a bit on that. So I'd be keen to hear maybe from Esther and from also from Dr. Chaya, right? So to which extent the financing side of things has been a challenge, right, in their respective journeys?
If I may start first, that I think in order to implement effective initiative, we need a few things. One is leadership commitment. And you need to have very clear direction, clear target, clear ways to implement it. And just give you an example, resources and manpower are very important in order to implement, ambition is one thing, but how you implement it is very important. And research already showed that during downtime, if companies can invest in innovation, they will recover better. And that was exactly what we did over the last 2 years. In 2020, instead of downsizing our sustainability team, we doubled it. We actually set up an innovation team just focusing on green building technology application, not just about scouting, because in fact, the industry already say that technologies to achieve net zero is already here. But whether you have the will and the resources and the funds, to really implement it, that is the biggest barrier. So we need knowledge, we need resources, we also need funding. So which leads us to the, sustainable finance, which actually HSBC is also one of our partners over the last few years. In 2017, April, actually CDL launched our very first green bond, which is also the first green bond by a Singapore company. And since then, we actually kickstarted the whole sustainability finance in the whole industry and the country. And today, sustainable finance, whether it is green loan, sustainability linked loan, and all are very, very strong enabler to accelerate green action. And over the last few years, since 2017, we have actually chalk up about more than 3 billion Sing dollars in terms of sustainable finance. And let's put it this way, technology and resources don't come free. So we need to put, investment into where we can really accelerate action. And we also have to set very clear strategy. For us, there are 3 deliverable we are looking at. The first one, of course, is decarbonization. That's why we set the net zero target with very specific details. How many thousands of square feet in gross floor area, how many developments, and how many tons of CO2. When you set target, it has to be specific, and otherwise you will be deemed as greenwashing. So that is decarbonization, and of course you must have a roadmap and a pathway to do so. We adopted the World Green Building Council's pathway to do that. And then the second one is actually digitalization. Risk mitigation is no longer sufficient. We need to, risk adaptation is where we can move the needle, adapt the, use the best technologies and solutions to do that. So innovation is definitely, the way forward, and the technology and all that. Last but not least is the last deliverable is disclosure and communication. And if you don't, report and disclose in a transparent and prompt manner, you will not be able to achieve very good ESG report card. And that is also what you can really help you to access to the fast growing ESG funds and sustainable finance. And these are the enabler for companies to really implement it. Just have the commitment, just have the target, it's not enough. You need resources, you need knowledge, you need action, to make it happen. Turn ambitions into action and impact.
Thanks for that, Esther. Dr. Chaya, any reflections on your side, on your journey, and the financing considerations?
Yeah, actually, I certainly agree with Esther, right? I think first of all, we have to frame aspiration to make sure that we have a clear target to address in terms of what to do, when to do, and how to do it, right? And I have to make sure that we communicate clearly inside organization and also externally to make sure that everyone have understand their role, right, on how to contribute. Related to financial aspect, I think planning is very important. Once you lay out the clear strategy, right? You have to also think about the capital allocation, right, for both short term and long term. For example, GC on our decarbonization, we set the target to net zero for 2050, right? I think we plan about $5 billion US on the abatement alone, and another 22 billion is on the business restructuring, meaning how to transition to the low carbon business. But it's maybe 20-30 years from now, right? In the short term, every annual budget, we also have to plan for those expanding, also how to make sure that we explore any possibility for the opportunity too, right? It's not just a concern of risk. I think we believe that sustainability or climate related business have opportunities. And if we can manage in terms of not just on the capital side, but also on the opportunity side, I think we can not just have an opportunity for the new business as well, right? But I think part of the planning, we have to make sure that we have a clear roadmap, right, and milestone. For example, what should be the right investment for the right time. I think you mentioned before that more the CEO mentioned about the availability of the technology or even the supporting from regulatories, right? I think we have to make sure that we closely monitor those issues and try to basically adjust your roadmap to ensure there is optimum way to do it, right? Not too fast or too slow. But it's a lot of many factors, and I think we have to be proactive in terms of to make sure we understand the landscape, right? Not just on regulatory, on technology, and also the business environment. This will help us to execute in terms of, for example, decarbonization or other sustainability initiative quite effectively, and still competitive in terms of the business.
Yeah, thanks for that. So yeah, so I think you've both mentioned the element of the levels of ambition, specificity of the targets, the roadmap, short term, medium term, long term, having a clear pathway, right? All the investments that are required to enable that, digitization playing a key role. And then the communications linked to all of that, is also then what enables, right? This access to financing, what enables to mobilize the company, etc. So maybe one last question here, right? So, I mean, I think all three of you clearly, from what you shared, have achieved a lot already, right, on your sustainability journey. And linked to where you stand now, like, what's next, right, in your journey? What's the next focus? Whether it's upping the goal, whether it's better integration with your partners and making this a more collective action. I mean, anything you can share now with regards to your journey and what you see as the next priority?
Well, if I may just start that. Now, nobody will ask why anymore. And now it's like how. So, I mean, every industry will have a big ecosystem of supply chain, and for us as a developer, we work with, apart from financial investor, we need to work with the architect, contractor, main contractors or contractor, and also, the supplier, because their impact is my impact. I have to be accountable for, the scope 3 embodied carbon. So my supplier, the sustainable building materials will impact on my performance. So that's why I think what we have actually started is, apart from giving a policy or, procurement policy and a code of conduct for our supply chain, we also need to help them, because let's put it this way, SME actually account for 90% of, global economy, but they are not like the big MNC. They have, big MNC has the resources, has the knowledge to do so. The SME are the ones that we need to help them a little bit, for the so-called just transition. We can't just overnight, screen out all those who are not committed to, climate action. So we need to, engage them and educate them. what sort of, ESG policies and practices we want them to come on board with us. So we have actually started more than about 20 years already, actually. Started with like environment, health and safety policies. We, give them very clear guidance and also give regulars, audit with all the contractors, suppliers together to look at their EHS performance. Those that who are laggers, will have to, up the game. And those who are leader, we actually, give them the priority that the next tender, we will give them the priority. So only with the whole ecosystem of suppliers and contractors, together, we can talk about green building. We can talk about super low energy building and towards net zero. It will not happen overnight. So we need to give them change their mindset, give them the skill set and help them in terms of technology and really help to measure performance and help them to plug the gaps. I think partnership engagement is very, very important. No one organization can change the world alone. So we need to work very closely, and that's why we are in really good partnership with the Global Compact Network Singapore, UN Global Compact, not just the sustainability professional, but even CFO, because the people who control the money will be the one who help to really, accelerate action towards net zero. So I think the partnership, the engagement, the alignment, we really need to align all the stars, not just, management, but also everyone, and I think in Singapore, the regulation is very clear. We also pledge for net zero by or around 2050 that come together with a very ambitious carbon tax. Today, we are paying $5 per ton. 2 years later, 5 times more. Another 2 years, 9 times more. By 2030, will be up to $50 to $80, per ton. So that will make the business case of decarbonization much, much stronger. And as we are talking, actually, the new regulation is also, engaging the board of directors to up the game. And it is mandatory for directors to take the course about sustainability and ESG. So only with that, the whole value chain, the whole corporate structure from the board to the management, from the headquarters to the subsidiaries to, offsite, onsite, everybody can come on board to go towards the North Star goal of net zero. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Esther. Yeah, if I could just jump in here as well. So I think, that's, I think what Esther mentioned around, in terms of the next steps is critical because, it's the just transition, I think is what she mentioned, which is pertinent because, we are obviously in a situation where we are, we're basically, as she mentioned, it's happened in the last 24 months that it's become mainstream, right? And she's been working in it for 20 years and she's seen the acceleration in the last 24 months. So I strongly agree that especially for, Southeast Asian economies who are quite commodity dependent to a large extent, this period of transition is important. Now, increasingly, the conversations with the clients as well, it's becoming more pertinent. They themselves are becoming aware of the need to transition, for various reasons, i.e., one of the questions in the panel was for SMEs, for example. So SMEs definitely, who are part of a global supply chain will be assessed based on their own on their own commitments to sustainability, where are they sourcing materials from, their labor practices, and so on. So I believe that in this period, what we call the just transition period, is very important to get everybody onto the playing field, where they are able to, everybody's able to benefit from this. And in that respect, we also must, we really must reiterate that for those, and I've seen, one of the conclusions of the report was that a lot of people have decreased their investments, in the last few years, and not extremely surprising, given that COVID has, required a lot of people to, the cash flows have been compressed, and business as usual has not been business as usual. So as a result of that, we need to, re-engage with companies to ensure that this is seen as an investment and not so much as a cost. Similar to digitalization, if you don't form part of that investment or that trajectory, then you are going to, you probably could fall off in terms of the next phase of growth. And then finally, just from our own experience, I mean, what's next for us? As I mentioned, we are in our own 24-month transition to become a value-based intermediation. So what does that mean exactly? So that means that we have now provided a commitment, a public commitment, that, over the next 24 months, which started in 2020 and has been slightly affected by what's happened in the global environment, is that we will, align, the vision of ours is to align at least 51% of our financing portfolio, which currently stands at about 13 billion ringgit, slightly shy of $3 billion, to be 51% in alignment with value-based intermediation principles, which means that now we are undertaking currently a taxonomy, which is called our value-based intermediation taxonomy, where we are setting out how we are approaching both the financings that we provide from a wholesale as well as a retail perspective. And what do we feel qualifies with the principles of triple bottom line, which is people, prosperity, and the planet from a banking perspective. So we're undertaking this taxonomy, which is due to be reviewed by a second party opinion provider. And we aim to, on an annual basis, once we have established this framework, to attest to how many percent of our portfolio is in alignment with value-based principles. So that is one in terms of, our own portfolio. Secondly is disclosure. Disclosure is becoming increasingly important. And, we've provided our TCFD disclosure in 2021. We are the first bank in Malaysia and I understand to be in Southeast Asia to provide a TCFD disclosure. And that was our first disclosure, and we look to further solidify that as we come into 2022, which will be our second turn. We also partner with UNGC in terms of the surveys that they do in the market, and we also provide our status of progression in terms of the UNGC. And then thirdly and lastly is capacity building, which is also part of that whole ecosystem in terms of training the market, because we're all on this transition journey. So HSBC is part of what they call the JC3, which is the Joint Climate Change in Malaysia, which is run by Bank Negara Securities Commission. So we're in charge of the subcommittee 4, which is in charge of capacity building. So we have partnered with the likes of the likes of EY, the likes of KPMG, and so on, to provide free training to anybody at all who wants to participate. It's industry-wide initiative. And the idea really is to move beyond just the practicality, the theology of things, but more into the practicality of matters. So up to date, we've rolled 2 to 3 trainings out. It's for the financial industry as well as the insurance sector, and then we're also bringing in corporates because we want to hear from them and say, what are their challenges, what are they facing? And then, sorry, I had one more, which is financing solutions. So part of this whole transition is accelerating financing solutions. So we aim to provide, we mentioned up to 1 trillion globally. In Malaysia, we have a fund of 1 billion ringgit, which we aim to deploy. And year to date, we have, a few successes in terms of we were the sole advisor, we were a joint advisor to the government of Malaysia for their first sustainable sukuk. We also we were the sole advisor for an oil and gas company, which raised the sustainability linked sukuk, which was the first in the market. Again, it's an oil and gas company, so it's adhering to certain KPIs. We're ambitious. And on the topic of procurement, we provided a financing to a cocoa manufacturer, which their suppliers of their cocoa were from sustainable source. So we're hoping to essentially with the financing solutions that we provide, with the capacity buildings, with the disclosure that we are engaged in, we hope to progress this as we go from year to year and to play our part in the transition to a lower carbon economy.
Thanks for that. Maybe as a follow-on, I have a question for Dr. Chaya, maybe a bit specifically on the science-based targets. So we see in the study, right, that a lot of CEOs accept the reduction from 2 degrees to 1.5 degrees. But yet, right, in terms of companies really signing up to science-based emission targets and these commitments, that's still sometimes a bit of a work in progress. So keen to hear, based on your own, kind of like transformation and experience, so any insights here, right, in terms of companies adhering to the science-based emissions targets. Any views here?
Yeah. I think if you look at the science-based target, right, it's quite a clear guideline on how to comply, right? Certain reduction per year on the greenhouse gases. But I think what we in the industrial sector is a couple of issues, right? For example, the readiness of each sector or every industry is a bit different. For example, in Southeast Asia, I think many sectors still on the growth stage, meaning we still produce greenhouse gases, right? It's not a phase of reduce the greenhouse gas according to science-based target just yet. So I think we have to evaluate from the every sector from the industry which one is ready to do so and which one is not. But once we be able to have a clear roadmap on the reduction, I think it's quite good to be aligned with the science-based target, right? But again, a few things, right? As we discussed, is I think the journey for Southeast Asia just started. I think Singapore have been well ahead. You have a certain instrument to manage, but for other countries, we need a support in terms of regulatories too, right? And some certain standard. For example, should we have how we can do greenhouse gas accounting for each country, and how, for example, right, in terms of support from regulatories, should we have a trading scheme or should we have a tax like Esther mentioned, right, to ensure that we can have the optimums in terms of how to manage in the region. I don't think just one company or a single country can do it. It's just a joint effort, and we have to come up with something that we can move forward as a region.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think there was one interesting question in the chat, right, which I would like to put to the panelists as well. I mean, we've been talking a lot of the importance of top-down, driven by the CEO, et cetera, on these journeys, because it truly is transformations, right? But sometimes we also still see elements of, sometimes generation gaps, right, between more junior employees that are very passionate about this, understand the urgency, want their companies to move, but we can have senior leadership, which maybe is, less in tune to these concepts. So for people who, who are in companies where maybe it's not top-down driven yet, I mean, any views or insights, to share on how to how to get the company and groups of stakeholders to move, right, in situations where we don't have the optimal kind of top-down scenario, let's call it that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if I may share, I mean, in fact, we don't have Greta in every country, but we have actually seen, the change that there are many actually younger, more vocal NGOs, and even in Thailand, I met, I think, is it a Lily Tiger or something, 11 years old, was very, very vocal in driving the climate action. And I will be in Bangkok next week also. We'll be catching up with some of the NGO. Even in Singapore, there are a lot of NGOs. And in fact, at Glasgow last year, when I was there with actually 2 young eco champions, and actually walking around to promote this campaign, we call it Keep Calm and Love Our Planet. Basically, is to tackle the rising climate anxiety among young people. There are a lot of research and data show that a lot of young people, especially in the age group of 17 to 25, they are all feeling very depressed and feel helpless and hopeless about the future. And all these are the voices that they will be asking for change. And these are our investor, consumers, and future employees. And so all these will be pressure, will be giving pressures to companies, to even regulators. So I think the time has come already, and we can't wait for another 10 years and 20 years to change. And I would say that a lot of senior management are well aware of, the fast, growing change for green, for sustainable business practices.
Well, and I think companies are even starting to feel it, I would say, from the perspective of ability to attract talent, etc. Right? You're starting to see these situations where, if companies are not serious about this, just doing greenwashing, there's no purpose, there's no vision, it's not in the core of the DNA. Attracting the right talent is also actually becoming, more difficult, right? So, okay, yeah, interesting insights here. Maybe Rajamir, so I understand your company participated in the SDG Ambition Accelerator last year. Be keen to hear your perspective, right, of what you gained from the program and that experience. given also what you shared and what a critical role your company and your sector is playing on sustainability.
Yep, I think so. How the experience was a very good experience for us. We as a group, we've already set a very ambitious target, which is towards the 1.5 degree science-based pathway. However, the accelerator program, which was participated by HSBC Amanah, allowed us to both finesse the approach that we're taking towards institutionalizing our own net zero commitment and sustainable finance targets. Also, the benefit that we derived from participating in that accelerator program was that we obtained exposure to a learning environment with companies and businesses from various walks of life and distinctions and sectors, who are in their own ways contributing to the SDGs in various ways, namely gender equality, to zero waste, to moving the world to a science-based pathway. And this allowed us to sort of frame the angle through which they are contributing towards sustainability in the SDGs. In addition, we also understood from participating in that particular program an appreciation for how we can facilitate financing opportunities for these various diverse aims and the challenges that companies face in developing their roadmaps towards SDG ambitions. And a good example would be what some of our colleagues did in Bangladesh, where they worked on an innovative sustainable finance solution, which was based on KPIs such as gender equality, index loan, and also Bangladesh's first social loan principles, which were based on a microfinancing institution. And since then, we've also seen capital market instruments, sort of divert away from, the traditional green, social, and sustainable bonds to what we see as the latest, which is nature-based solutions. So the World Bank participated in a very interesting issuance just a couple of weeks ago, which was a rhino conservation bond. And that really is something which is, the proceeds of which would be used for conservation efforts in African countries. So we're really seeing, by participating in such a program, we can see the pain points which are experienced by various of our customer segments and non-customer segments in various different fields, and that allows us to get, shape the view moving forward.
Thanks for that. So I think from a timeline perspective, I think we'll probably conclude a bit of the Q&A. I would like to thank all our distinguished panelists for sharing their journeys, their insights in this very interesting conversation. And I'll invite Esther Chang from Global Compact Network Singapore for some closing remarks. Thank you all very much for your insights, and thank you for the questions in the post. Apologies, we never have time to cover everything, but it was a very insightful discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jurgen, Esther, Raja, Emir, and Dr. Chaya for sharing these insightful findings. And it is very, very clear that greater ambition is needed. It's a very lively discussion. I see all the Q&A chat is going, so would endeavor to answer some of that on the spot and also respond to you later. Well, in partnership with Accenture, SAP, and 3M, we have collectively launched the SDG Ambition Accelerator, which Jurgen has kindly mentioned earlier, and a few of us have participating in it. This is to help ensure business decisions have a lasting positive impact on people and the planet. It's a 6-month accelerator program that aims to challenge and support participating companies in setting ambitious corporate targets and accelerate the integration of the SDGs into the core of business. It enables companies to move beyond incremental progress to truly step up their transformative change. And the first round, we had brought together about 600 companies into the program over 65 countries. And we will be launching another round of the SDG Ambition very soon. In fact, next week, we will be hosting the Leader Summit. It's the annual flagship event for UNGC. And as part of this event, we're also going to have a special segment, a hybrid segment taking place in Bangkok. It's called the Uniting Business in ASEAN Conference. So we're going to be sharing more information about the launch of the SDG Ambition at this upcoming conference. This conference is open complimentary to everybody in the Global Compact. My colleague will drop a link in the chat box. So if you haven't already signed up, please do so. Now, finally, I want to invite all of you to really think critically about how your companies can step up as leaders by raising your ambition to move beyond incremental progress. And like we said, time is running out. There's a lot of different support mechanisms and pressure points from all over that's encouraging, and that's really begging companies, the private sector, to step up in their sustainability progress. So let's work together to kind of echo what Esther said. It's about partnership, engagement, and alignment. And we can't do it all. No one company, no one individual can tackle all the problems, but certainly we can all do something within our sphere of influence. So with that, I want to thank you very much for joining us today. We look very much to see you again very soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a great day, everyone.